One-shot builds are nothing new. In fact, my knowledge of some gimmicks were used in the latest Elden Ring bingo match that I took part in to try and one-shot Moog with a combination of the Great Stars weapon and the Wild Strike's Ash of War. And although I wasn't actually able to take home the crown and defeat Moog because I was using an unupgraded Great Stars, it still did a substantial amount of damage. So that left me thinking, can you make the Great Stars and more importantly Wild Strikes a one-shot machine? So that is exactly what we're going to be trying to do today, and of course I know some of you might want to mimic this for yourself, maybe with some other weapons, so I will also show you the route and how we put everything together. So definitely sit back, relax, enjoy this video, and if you happen to do so, if you don't mind me asking you to leave a little like rating down below, as it genuinely helps out the channel tremendously, that would be greatly appreciated. But now that that's all out the way, let's see if we can turn the Great Stars into a one-shot weapon. Now, of course, just before we go any further, I am going to address the elephant in the room. Well, Jazza, how can Wild Strikes be a one-shot move? And the reason why I'm considering this one shot is because, much like other weapons like Mario's Executioner or the Geezer's Wheel, or even things like Ancient Dragon's Lightning Strike, where they deal multiple attacks with just one press of the button, that is still considered like a one shot, as you're literally only pressing or holding your attack button once. So where Wild Strikes can be held and will only stop until you either run out of stamina or FP, which stamina is usually the thing that runs out first, I am considering it a one shot if we can defeat our enemies before either the FP or stamina runs out. So once I created a brand new character and made them a hero just simply for the strength stats, I then came up with a neat little shopping list of items that we needed to collect. And yes, I'm bringing back the old school shopping list. This time around on our list, we basically needed to get ourselves the Great Stars weapon. That does require going to Altus Plateau, so we do in fact need to get the Dectus Medallion, because again, I don't want to be killing any bosses if it's not going to be a one-shot. So the Dectus Medallion is the only way to get there without having to take down any bosses. But then of course we definitely need to be picking up the Wild Strike's Ash of War, because that is going to be the attack or the method in question that we're using today. But we also need to pick up the Wonder Physic to make use of some extra boosting items like the Strength Knot tier and the Green Burst tiers as well. But then we also need to upgrade the weapon so that it can deal enough damage, so therefore needs to pick up a bunch of smithing stones, whilst also picking up the Blood Flame Blade incantation and a few talismans that will help us with our damage output. So after opening up Limgrave and more importantly getting our trusty steed, I then ventured off to both Fort Hate and Fort Feroth respectively to go and grab the two halves of the medallion. In fact, on the way to Fort Hate, we could actually make a trip to the second Church of Marika, where the Wonder Physic is residing, which again is another key item that we needed to pick up along the way. And after getting our first key item, we then just continued down the path heading further southeast, and lo and behold, we arrived at Fort Hate, which is holding the left side of the medallion. So again, just by going through this castle, heading up this particular ladder, we can then open up the chest and get said left piece of the medallion. And then by heading back to the gate front side of Grace, or at least just any of the sides of Graces outside of a Gill Lake, which is the massive lake in the middle of Limgrave right here, we can then head into the ruins and use the trap chest inside to teleport us all the way over to Ohio. And then once we escape the streets of Ohio, we can get ourselves out into the wilderness, where we can head up towards Dragon Barrow and more specifically Fort Feroth. Again, once we're here, all we simply need to do is climb up this particular ladder this time and open this chest to then get the right side of the medallion and have it fully complete to go and use to open up to Altus Plateau. And that's exactly what we did next. And I also just want to point out that when you head to Altus Plateau, going through the Lernia of the Lakes, this is actually a fantastic area to not only pick up a load of smithing stones that we're going to need to upgrade the weapon, but also a load of runes. When you go through the Lernia of the Lakes, there are going to be little landmarks, which I call gazebos, that hold a statue inside of them, and in front or behind those statues in the middle of said gazebo will be either a bunch of smithing stone 2s or smithing stone 3s. They are of course going to be integral to upgrade the weapon, as I say, so definitely make sure that you try and find all of them that are located in the Learning of the Lakes. There's about sort of 6 or 7 of them dotted around the entire area, which will actually give you quite a substantial amount of these smithing stones that we need, which is of course very handy. But not only can you pick up a bunch of smithing stones, there's also a bunch of runes that you can pick up too, because there's a couple of graveyards dotted around this area, which inside those coffins, or just hanging on the side of them I should say, will be items you can pick up, which are going to be a variety of different valued runes, typically between runes number 2 and 6, which can hold anywhere up to 2,000 runes per item. But whilst you're ransacking the dead, you can also keep an eye out for the skies, because if you see these balloons holding the enemies up, if you have any throwing knives or kukris, which actually can be found near the glintstone dragon, you can throw said throwing knives at them, and once you pop the balloon, you will be rewarded with a golden rune 6, which again holds 2,000 runes. There again is about sort of like 7 or 8 of these balloons dotted around the entire Learning of the Lakes. There's actually more of them in the northernmost part of the lake area, just north of the glintstone dragon I just mentioned. So basically you need to collect all of the smithing stones and potentially like all of the grave runes in the southern part of the Learning of the Lakes, then head north to pop the rest of the balloons and get all of those runes. But once you've had enough of your grave robbing and balloon popping antics, we can then head further north to this part of the map where we will find the Dectus Lift, and as it's amply named, we can use the Dectus Medallion to use the Dectus Lift to get ourselves into Altus Plateau. And again, I'm just going to quickly show you the route on screen. It is going to be sped up. Obviously feel free to like slow it down if you need to see it in like better time, but as long as you follow this path and sort of like hang left rather than going right into Lionel Capital, like that massive Colosseum looking structure, you will then come across a broken bridge with a teleporter on it. Use said teleporter and he'll take you to the other side of that broken bridge, where you can then drop down and find this caravan. If you stop the caravan by giving the troll a nice little knee slap, you will then be able to open up the chest in the back of said caravan, and inside that chest will be the Great Stars weapon that we need. This is going to be the quickest way that you can pick up the Great Stars, because there is actually a second one tied to Varre's questline, but that requires doing a bunch of boss kills as well as just progressing the story, so like I say, it's not going to be as quick. But once you pick up this Great Stars, you can use a nearby site of grace like I did to level up your character with any runes that you've got so far, to make sure that we meet the minimum requirements for this weapon, which just so happens to be 22 strength and 12 dexterity. Once you've done that, I highly recommend that you take a trip back to Storm Hill, specifically to the Storm Hill Shack site of grace, because actually within about like 100 meters of this site of grace, there's 3 key items for this build. The first of which is going to be residing inside the Silver Scarab just slightly up the hill, which is our Ash of War of choice, being Wild Strike. So yes, you just follow this path, defeat the scarab that is residing right here, you will then be rewarded with the Wild Strike's Ash of War. But then if you head back to the Storm Hill Shack site of grace and sort of head in a bit of a northeasterly kind of direction, you will be able to see a troll on his own on this sort of like little hill that we lead up to, and just past him, or just behind him I should say, will be an altar on the floor with an item inside, which just so happens to be the Strength Knot tier, which can indeed go inside of our Wonder Physic, and of course will give us a plus 10 to our strength stat whenever we use the Wonder Physic, as long as obviously it's inside it. But then as for the third item that is actually located here and is really easy to get, that is going to be the smithing stone ones that we need. So the first stones required to upgrade the weapon to a plus 3. Again, if you actually start heading a bit more southeast, you will be able to find this body next to a bunch of fallen over chairs. We'll actually give you 3 smithing stone ones, which are really handy. But then if we head directly east, we can then find this valley of multiple giants residing in it, and in the middle of said valley will be a statue that has like a weird glow where it has been slightly cut open. Basically with this statue you need to break it, but the only way to break it is to get a giant enemy to either attack it or run into it, and luckily for us there's about 10 of them roaming around in these giant trolls, so all you need to do is simply get 1 or 2 of them to follow you. Like I say, just getting them to run into that statue is still going to be enough to break it, and then then once the statue's broken, you can then go and pick up the item inside, which is going to be 5 smithing stone 1s and a smithing stone 2 for your troubles as well. Then once you've collected these 3 or 4 items in this particular area, if we actually fast travel back to the Lake of Lernia, more specifically the Lernia Lake Shore site of grace, there is going to be a merchant residing next to this site of grace who is actually going to sell both smithing stone 1s and smithing stone 2s. As long as you have picked up all of the stones that are residing in the gazebos that I talked about earlier, this merchant will be selling you enough stones to get 12 in both the smithing stone 1s and the smithing stone 2s. And the reason why 12 is important is because that's the amount that you need to complete that bracket of upgrades before then going on to the next smithing stone. But if for whatever reason you still don't have 12 stones after buying them from the merchant and obviously checking out all the gazebos, you can indeed head northeast to this specific location on the map where there's going to be the Raya Lucaria Crystal Tunnel, which will have a bunch of smithing stone 2s and 3s inside of it, and once you clear that out, you will most definitely have 12 smithing stone 2s on you. But either way, once you've assured yourself you've got 12 of the smithing stone 2s and 1s, we need to actually pick up another item from the Lake of Lernia, which you probably could have picked up earlier if you wanted to in the route, but I did it now, and that is to go and pick up Blood Flame Blade, which is something we are going to apply on our weapon at all times. This is also another good time to upgrade your character's stats to meet the minimum requirements for this, because you do need 10 arcane and 15 faith in order to even use this incantation in the first place. But once you've grabbed that, we can then actually head back to Outer's Plateau, this time heading to the Sealed Tunnel, which is kind of like towards Lionel, the capital in the middle. Obviously, the location of the map is right here too. When you enter the Sealed Tunnel, if you hang right, there's actually going to be a chest where that will give you a smithing stone bell bearing. This bell bearing will allow you to buy an infinite amount of smithing stone 3s and 4s, which are of course the next ones needed to upgrade this weapon further. So once you've obtained this bell bearing, go to the round table hold. If you haven't unlocked the round table hold yet, you do just need to go back to Storm Hill or even the Great Front Site of Graces to get Melina to spawn in, or have the opportunity to speak to Melina, where she will then take you to the round table hold. And then if you go down the left corridor, you will then find these 2 finger maidens, which are indeed a merchant. If you give them that bell bearing that we picked up, you can, like I say, purchase an infinite amount of smithing stones 3s and 4s from them. Of course, they do cost runes, so we can't just buy like an infinite straight away. Like, we are gonna need to actually pay for them. So if you just buy 12 of each, you will then have enough to upgrade the weapon even more. But of course, like I said earlier, some smithing stone 3s are going to be around the Lake of Lernia, and some smithing stone 4s were actually inside of that sealed tunnel. So if you've explored both of those areas, you might not necessarily need to buy 12, but basically just buy enough to have 12. And then once you've bought all of those smithing stones, if you've still got enough runes, or I would just heavily suggest that you do this anyway, so go and get some more runes if you haven't got them, because you will need to pick up the finger seal, which is here, which is actually going to be the thing you use to apply or use incantations like the Blood Flame Blade that we picked up earlier. So definitely make sure that you can buy the finger seal as well as the stones when you get to this point. And again, just upgrade the weapon as much as you can. You will probably find that if you haven't collected enough runes like I did, you will not have enough to level up the weapon to plus 12 just yet. But of course, if you do have enough runes, then definitely make sure you do that now. But an easy enemy to go and get enough runes to make this happen is definitely going to be Grail, the big, massive dragon that is laying there next to Fort Feroth. You might remember this area from earlier, where we got the second half of the medallion to gain access to Outer's Plateau. But if you make sure that you at least apply wild strikes to your weapon whilst you were talking to Master Hugh in the round table hold, you can now put on Blood Flame Blade and just go to town using that mechanic that we're going to be using later on, and with a couple of bleed effects that happen every now and again, his health bar will be depleted and 70,000 runes will be yours to keep. So with your brand new deposit into your bank account, you can then go and upgrade that weapon fully now if you hadn't already, or at least plus 12 I should say, sorry, and then the rest of the points should either be put into vigor and strength, or just pure strength if you're a more experienced player. Of course, you'll probably know that having 14-15 vigor is going to be enough for you to basically take 2 or 3 hits before dying, especially against the early game bosses. But of course, for those of you that are new to the game and want to explore things around, I highly recommend that you increase your vigor stat just so then you got more health, less likely to die straight away, or at least relatively quickly in boss fights. But we are of course trying to prioritize the amount of damage that we're doing, and strength is basically going to be the best dictator for that damage. But once you've used all of those runes to obviously improve the stats that you want to improve, we need to go and pick up 2 more things. There's actually one thing that I've missed off the shopping list, which is going to be Flame Grant Me Strength. This is again another buff that we can apply to ourselves this time rather than the weapon, where it will increase our physical damage and fire damage, which is actually going to be minimal when we're running Blood Flame Blade, but that's still going to be extremely crucial for our damage output because we still get the 10% buff to physical damage, which our weapon is of course going to be doing. And then once you've grabbed Flame Grant Me Strength from Caelid, we can again take another trip to the Altars Plateau to go and get our Talisman of Choice, because again, where we haven't defeated any bosses yet, we only have 1 talisman slot, and the one that I recommend that you go and get is going to be the Ritual Swords Talisman, as that will boost our overall damage output by 10% as long as we're at full HP, which should be pretty much most of the time. So if you head to this location in the Altars Plateau, where there is actually going to be our first boss fight, so it's also going to be a nice trial period to see if this weapon has what it takes to one-shot bosses. So again, load up Flame Grant Me Strength, load up Blood Flame Blade, and then once you enter the boss arena and come face to face with Gillica, we can then just hold down our LT or L2 button, and lo and behold, one-shot our first boss. Yes, this weapon is capable of doing it, but of course it is just a little mini boss in like a little mini dungeon who is actually quite weak to both bleed and just damage in general. And then just before we actually went to fight Margit, I took another trip back to Caelid. I know, a lot of back and forth. This route was not the most optimal, let me just tell you that for sure, as you probably already know by now. I actually went back there to go and defeat the Putrid Avatar that's actually next to Grail, because if you defeat this avatar, that will drop you 91,000 runes. Yep, 91,000. That's enough for like 10 levels at this point. And then once I got another huge deposit into our bank account, I then went and upgraded my character even more, making sure that I gave myself enough mind and endurance, so 10 and 15 in that respectively, whilst then just pumping the rest of the points into strength to put it all the way up to 38. So I would advise that you try and hit these sort of stats that I've got on screen for you now before going to Margit to try and see if this can actually one-shot. And then with those stats and the Ritual Swords Talisman equipped that we just got, along with Blood Flame Blade and Flame Grant Me Strength and our plus 12 Great Stars with Wild Strikes, we then entered Margit's arena, said hello to our good old friend, and oh brother, this guy stinks! So we then entered Margit's arena for a second time, tried it again, held on to our LT or L2 button, and this time it worked. So we have successfully created a build that is capable of destroying a story boss as well as a mini boss with one shot or one use of your attack button. So I guess this kind of does answer the question, but I wanted to get revenge on our good friend Mohg. Since I fumbled the bag basically in that Elden Ring bingo match, I just wanted to upgrade this build and this weapon as much as I could on the way to Mohg. So we actually went and took down Godric nice and easy, and then also went and took down Radahn nice and easy. Oh yeah, remember when I said at the beginning stamina is going to be a problem? Yeah, Radahn is where that starts being obvious, god damn it. So now I have a bigger problem, because apparently I need to worry about my stamina and also just improve my damage as well, because I need to basically give myself the best advantage I can against Mohg, otherwise this isn't happening. I essentially went through Celia Tunnel in Caelid to get a bunch of Smithing Stone 5s, also journeyed through Volcano Manor and other areas in Altars Plateau to once again grab some Smithing Stone 6s and upgraded this weapon as much as I fully could, hitting a plus 18 now as my maximum. But after upgrading the weapon, I actually took a trip back to Limgrave, more specifically near the Second Church America, where we got the Wonder Physic at the very beginning, because if you head to the Minor Erd Tree, at the base of that Minor Erd Tree is going to be the Green Spill Crystal Tier. This will increase the amount of stamina that we have, and by traversing around the world and getting a few more levels, I could increase my endurance just that little bit more, and then just by simply upgrading our weapon, increasing our stamina value, we can then go back to Radahn and successfully one-shot him too. This build was starting to come alive and was actually becoming really possible to go and defeat Mohg, so I decided to go and do it now. So I took a quick trip to Liondel's capital, went into the subterranean shunning grounds to go and pick up Mohg's shackle, which is going to come in very handy at the start of the fight. I then completed Varre's quest line to the point where I then got the medallion to head over to Mohgwyn's palace, traversed up the dreaded staircase of hell and came face to face with Mohg himself, and with just a simple tap of my X button to trap Mohg into place and about 10 or 15 seconds of continuous swiping, Mohg was Oh, for God's sake! Fine. I had to go and get more damage from somewhere, so I went and picked up a few more talismans and went back to Caelid and more specifically fought for off to go and get Radagon's Soreseal to not only increase my stamina but also increase my strength and dexterity too. And then just for good measure, whilst I was here in Mohgwyn's palace, I thought I'd go and obtain the white mask, which will then give you a plus 10% boost to your overall damage output whenever a bleed proc occurs, which is pretty quick obviously against Mohg. So with my brand new mask, new talismans and hopefully slightly higher damage output, I went back in to Mohgwyn Palace to fight Mohg once again, trapped him with a nice press of my X button, started swinging like hell, and oh my god, it worked. We had indeed defeated Mohg with just one shot or one tap or one use of the Ash of War button, therefore meaning that it was one shot all in the first phase 2. So yes, great stars with wild strikes and of course a few extras here and there can indeed one-shot bosses in Elden Ring. Of course, here's sort of like me going through the menus now in the background. Of course, we can take this a step further and create a full-on build with it. So if you guys want to see a part 2 where we go and defeat the rest of the enemies in the game, or at least the main bosses, because we've still got people like the Fire Giant, Morgott, Malekith, and of course even Godfrey and Radar Beast, then do hit that like button down below. If this video gets 500 likes, I will indeed do a part 2 where we finish off the game and fully complete this build in a similar kind of vibed video. But as I said at the beginning, if you want to stick around for more Elden Ring content like this, then definitely make sure that you're subscribed. We stream on this channel weekly, both Monday and Wednesday every week, as well as having 2 videos uploaded. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of content going around. But for now, as per the main question as to whether or not this weapon is a one-shot machine, it most certainly is, and of course, feel free to use this video as a guide to do it for yourself. And on that successful note, thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I guess I'll catch you in the next video of whatever it is that we make. Bye bye!